The second lesson in aviation physics is all about Newton's laws of motion. So, in the late 17th century, Sir Isaac Newton described three laws that govern all motion on Earth. So, we have three laws of motion as according to Sir Isaac Newton. So, let's go discuss them one by one. The first law of motion, this is actually known as what we call the law of inertia. So, the law of inertia states that Newton's first law of motion is often stated that as an object at rest tends to stay at rest, and an object in motion tends to stay in motion with the same speed and in the same direction unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. So again, the first law of Newton is also known as the law of inertia. So it states that if meron kayong object at rest, for example, you place a cup on a table. So, this is your table. Or a table to. And then, if you place a cup there, it will stay at rest. It will not move. There will be no movement. Its position will not change if there is no external force that will act on this object. Pero kapag meron ng external force, like for example, of course, ginalaw nyo, tinulak nyo yung cup. If you exerted a force dun sa cup, dun pa lang siya mag-change ng position. So, dun siya magkakaroon ng motion. And then, the second part of the first law of motion states that an object in motion tends to stay in motion with the same speed and in the same direction unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. So, if a car is speeding down the highway or the expressway at a constant speed of 80 kilometers per hour, tapos hindi naman siya nag-accelerate, hindi din siya nag-brakes kasi meron nasa harapan niya, para siya lang mag-isa. So, yung speed niya daw, all throughout ng movement niya will be constant unless, of course, pinindot or ginalaw ng driver yung pedal para mag-accelerate siya, para bumilis tayo. Or mag-brakes siya kasi meron pang sasakyan sa harap niya. So, kapag meron gano'n, nagkakaroon kasi ng unbalanced force. So, nag-iiba yung speed and pwedeng direction. Pwedeng mag-right, pwedeng mag-left. Pero kung yung motion niya, walang ibang external force, walang ibang affected na force, constant lang yan. Okay. So, how did the first law of motion became the law of inertia? Bakit siya tinawag na law of inertia? Ito kasi yun. Sabi niya, in fact, it is the natural tendency of objects to resist changes in their state of motion. Ibig sabihin, if an object is at a particular position, meron siyang natural tendency na hindi na gumalaw. Okay, this tendency is described as inertia. So, eto daw yung tinatawag nating inertia. So, paano natin masasabing meron nga tayong inertia? Okay, if nakasakay kayo sa jeep, okay, imagine riding a jeepney. Siyempre, yung jeep, kunwari you're in a constant motion, kaso may biglang pedestrian na tumatawid. So, yung jeepney driver, magbe-brake siya ng sudden. So, kapag meron tayong sudden brakes, di ba? Your body tends to move or to sway in the direction of the driver. Pero, unconsciously, mapapansin nyo yung katawan nyo, parang merong kumukontra. So, babalik kayo sa original position nyo. So, that yung imaginary force na kumukontra sa inyo para bumalibag kayo papuntang kalabas ng jeep is inertia. So, sinasabi niya dito, a more massive object has a greater tendency to resist changes in its state of motion. So, pag mas malaki yung object, mas malaki yung inertia. So, ganun siya. Pag mas malaki yung object natin, mas malaki yung inertia. How? So, imagine if meron kayong tinutulak na bata compared sa may tinutulak kayong sumo wrestler. So, yung bata, pag tinulak nyo siya, pwede nyo siyang ma-move yung position na medyo malayo-malayo, di ba? So, mas mabilis siyang itulak compared to if bigla nung itulak yung sumo wrestler, I doubt kung magagalaw niya siya. So, ganun yung inertia. Mas malaki kasi yung inertia ng more massive objects or mas malalaking bagay. Okay, again, inertia is the resistance of an object to a change in its motion. Okay? So, ito yung natural tendency. Ibig sabihin, naturally nandiyan na yan. Lahat tayo nakaka-experience ng yan. Lahat ng bagay meron ganyan. So, that is the first law of motion or what we call the law of inertia. So, sabi niya, unless, meron pa palang disclaimer dito, unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. So, ano ba yung unbalanced force? So, actually, we have two types of forces. We have balanced forces and we have unbalanced forces. So, what is the difference between the two? So, forces are said to be balanced when the net force on the object are zero. So, when we say net force, it is the total force. So, when the summation of your forces are equal to zero, it means your forces are balanced. For example, have you ever wondered kung bakit hindi tayo lumulutang or hindi tayo lumulubog kapag nakatayo tayo? Okay? That is because of a balanced force. So, for example, you are standing up and then we have the downward force which is natural in occurrence, which is gravity. Okay? So, gravity is pulling us down towards the earth. Pero, hindi tayo lumulubog because we have a normal force here exerted by the floor. So, the floor is pushing you up and then gravity is pulling you down. The reason why balance sila is because hindi ka lumulutang or hindi ka lumulubog. Kasi if the normal force of the floor is greater than the force of gravity, lulutang ka. But if gravity is more than the force exerted by the floor, lulubog ka naman. So the reason why masasabi natin silang balance is because hindi ka nag-change ng position, hindi ka umaangat sa floor, hindi ka bumababa sa floor. That is because these forces are balanced. So how about unbalanced forces? So forces are unbalanced when the net force is not zero. So when you add all the forces is not equal to zero. Okay? So for example, an example of this is that when two teams are playing tug-of-war, so, di ba, para manalo kayo, kailangan yung isang team mahila nyo papunta sa inyo. Di ba? So, hihilain mo siya papunta sa inyo para manalo kayo. So, ganun yung unbalanced force. Your force should be greater than the opposite side para mag-move siya papunta sa inyo. And then we have the second law of motion, which is known as the law of acceleration. So, what is the law of acceleration? So, sabi niya, Newton's second law of motion pertains to the behavior of objects for which all existing forces are not balanced. So, this law mainly focuses on unbalanced forces. Okay, kung iisipin nyo, yung first law, it focuses mainly on balanced forces. Kasi sabi niya nga, an object at rest, stay at rest, while an object in motion stays in motion unless mayroong external force or unbalanced force. So, second law pertains to the unbalanced forces. So, sabi niya, the second law states that the acceleration of an object is dependent upon two variables, the net force acting upon the object and the mass of the object. So, sabi niya, yung acceleration depends on the net force and the mass. Okay. The acceleration is always in the same direction as the net force. So that brings us to the formula of the law of acceleration, that is, the net force is equal to mass multiplied by the acceleration. So these are codependent upon each other. Sabi nga nila, dependent daw yung acceleration sa force and sa mass. So this is the only formula na tatandaan nyo when it comes to Newton's laws. So force is equal to mass times acceleration. Okay, how are we going to apply the formula in an example? So I have here a worded problem. So for a worded problem, the first one wanted to check if he gained weight. His body's mass is 65 kilograms. He stepped on the weighing scale to check his weight. If the acceleration due to gravity is 9.81 meters per second squared, find the net force he is exerting on the scale. So, kapag meron kayong, or given yung isang worded problem, the first thing that you have to do, the very important thing is that you need to label all the given first. Kasi pag walang label, di ba, yun, hindi kayo sigurado, pwede kayong magkamali. In the end, effort kayo na effort. Mag-solve, tas bandang huli, mali lang pala. Sayang ang effort nyo. So, importante ang label. Sorry. Okay. So, label muna natin. We have 65 kilograms, which is given as the mass. And then, we have acceleration due to gravity, just 9.81 meters per second squared. So, this is an acceleration. And then, we are looking for, ano yung required? Net force. So, we are going to look for the net force or F. So, we are going to use the formula. Isa lang naman yung formula all throughout this lesson, which is force is equal to mass multiplied by the acceleration. So, just a quick note for your units. For net force, this will always be in Newton. Mass will always be in kilogram. And acceleration would always be in meter per second squared. So, tatandaan nyo yung units na yan. Ito lang dapat yung units na meron tayo para makapag-come up tayo sa Newton. Why? Kasi actually, guys, 1 Newton is equal to 1 kilogram meter per second squared. So, this is equivalent to 1 Newton. So, kailangan para makabuo tayo ng Newton, meron kayong kilogram meter per second squared. Kaya dapat, yan lang yung units ng mga mass tsaka acceleration para Newton yung force natin. So, after labeling and then identifying our formula, pwede na tayong mag-solve. So, we have force is equal to mass times acceleration. So, we're looking for the force. All you have to do is directly substitute the values. So, mass is 65 kilograms multiplied by the acceleration, which is 9.81 meters per second squared. And then, check nyo muna if yung units nyo tama. So, kung i-check natin dito, we will come up with kilogram meter per second squared. Ibig sabihin, nasa tamang landas kayo. So, all you need to do is multiply. So, we have 65 multiplied by 9.81. So, we will come up with the answer 637.65. So, kilogram meter per second squared is correct na. Okay, pag ito yung naging final answer nyo, tama na yun. But, ang pinaka-correct na answer is you have to convert the kilogram meter per second squared into kung ano yung unit talaga ng force, which is Newton. So, capital N. So, this will be your final answer. So, ganito lang kadali magsagot ng sample problem. Now, if nahihirapan kayo dito sa force is equal to MA, later on, I'll show you a triangle para malaman nyo paano pag hindi na yung force yung hinahanap, paano pag yung mass na, paano pag yung acceleration na. So, later, I'll be showing that to you. And then, this is another example. In an Olympic marathon, a track runner has a mass of 50 kilograms. If he accelerates 12 meters per second squared, what is the net force he exerted to win the race? So again, you need to label your given first. We have 50 kilograms, which is your mass, and then 12 meters per second squared, which is your acceleration. So, we are looking for the net force. So again, we are just going to use the same formula. So all throughout, ito lang yung formula na gagamitin nyo. Force is equal to mass times acceleration. So, force is equal to mass times acceleration. And then mass is 50 kilograms multiplied by the acceleration, which is 12 meters per second squared. So, kung titingnan nyo, tama na yung units natin. We have kilogram and meters per second squared. So, okay na. You can continue answering. So, automatically, your force will always be in newtons. Okay? So, 50 times 12 is equal to 600 newtons. Yan, ganyan lang kadali. So, actually, almost ganyan lang yung mga problems dito sa second law, direct substitution lang. All you have to do is ensure that your units are in newtons, kilogram, and meter per second squared. Okay, what if hindi na yung force yung hinahanap? What if yung hinahanap na natin is the mass or the acceleration? Okay, so for example, we have this problem. A net force of 15 newtons is exerted on an encyclopedia to cause it to accelerate at a rate of 5 meters per second squared. Determine the mass of the encyclopedia. So again, just label the given. We have 15 newtons. So this is a net force. So this is F. Exerted on an encyclopedia to cause it to accelerate at a rate of 5 meters per second squared. So this is your acceleration. And now, we're going to look for the mass. Okay. So, kahit mass na yung hinahanap, we are still going to use the same formula, which is force is equal to mass times acceleration. So, i-derive lang natin from there yung magiging formula natin to determine the mass. So, hinahanap natin yung mass. Okay? So, from the formula force is equal to mass times acceleration, you need to divide or derive the formula para ang mangyari, yung mass na lang yung matira sa isang side. So, ganun. You need to isolate the variable for mass, which is letter M. So, kailangan natin itong i-isolate. So, para ma-isolate nyo yung variable in an equation, all you need to do is you need to divide both sides by yung katabi. Okay? Sabi nga nila, para makuha mo yung isang bagay, kailangan wala na siyang kasama. Mas madali siyang makuha pag wala na siyang kasama. So, you need to divide both sides by A, the acceleration. So, cancel A dun sa right side. So, your formula will then be mass is equal to force over acceleration. Okay, so eto na yun. Okay na, since isolated na yung mass na variable. So, all you need to do is directly write the value for force and acceleration. So, force is 15 newtons all over an acceleration of 5 meters per second squared. So, mass is equal to 15 divided by 5, 3. And then, our unit for mass will be kilogram. So, why kilogram? Diba nga, ang Newton is equal to kilogram meter per second squared. So, pag kinancel natin yung meter per second squared, ang matitira is kilogram. So, your mass is in kilogram. Now, paano pag nalilito kayo dito sa derivation? So, meron tayong tinatawag na father, mother, anak triangle. Okay, I call it father, mother, anak triangle. So, all you need to do is draw a triangle and then divide it into 2, tapos yung sa baba, yung may base, divide nyo ulit into 2. So, magkakaroon tayo ng 3 parts. And then sa taas is, ang gagawin nyo, sulat nyo yung F, tapos yung sa baba, MA. Okay. Tawag ko dyan, father, mother, anak. So, kunwari, hinahanap natin yung father. Hinahanap natin yung father. Kung hinahanap nyo yung father, bilugan nyo siya, yung magiging formula nyo is yung matitira sa baba, which is mother, anak. So, pag magkatabi sila, multiply. So, it means F is equal to MA. Now, paano? Pag ang hinahanap nyo is yung nanay or the mass, mother. Okay, paano pag yung mother yung hinahanap? So, ganun din yung gagawin nyo. All you need to do is, bilugan nyo siya. Okay, bilugan natin yung mother. So, siya yung hinahanap nyo, hindi siya kasali. So, ang matitira is father over anak. So, ibig sabihin, yung mass natin is F over A. Kasi nasa taas yung tatay. Okay, ganyan siya. Father over anak. Okay, since hindi sila magkatabi. Pag magkatabi, doon lang multiplication. Pag ganyan, division siya. And then, paano pag yung acceleration naman yung nawawala? So, pag acceleration naman po yung nawawala, okay, again, bilugan natin yung anak. Ang matitira is father over mother. So, anak is equal to father over mother, F over M. So, ito lang yung tatlong formulas actually na iikutan nung lahat ng solving dito. So, mas madali kung memorize yung triangle. Pero if comfortable na kayo sa pagde-derive using the original formula tapos isolating the variable, it's fine. Pero tinuro ko lang to sa mga nalilito pa pag mag-derive. So, yan na. Okay na. Okay. So, what if acceleration naman yung nawawala? So, meron tayong problem. Determine the acceleration that result when a 12 Newton net force is applied to a 3 kilogram object. So, we have here 12 newtons, which is the net force. And then 3 kilograms, which is mass. So, we have force and mass. We're going to look for the acceleration, which is A. So, from the original formula, so dun muna tayo sa derivation. Force is equal to mass multiplied by acceleration. We're going to look for A, so you need to divide both sides by yung katabi, M. Cancel M. So, it means acceleration is equal to force over mass. So, kung titignan yung rectangle natin, triangle natin kanina. So, divided by 2 there. Father, mother, anak. So, since nahanap yung anak, ayun, nakikita nyo, father over mother. So, it's the same. Then, just substitute the values. 12 newtons as your force. And then, we have a 3 kilogram mass. So, acceleration is 12 divided by 3, which is 4. And then, our unit for acceleration will always be meters per second squared. So, yan. Acceleration is 4 meters per second squared. Okay, let's try a more complex sample problem. A soccer player starts at rest and accelerates forward, reaching a velocity of 8 meters per second in 2.5 seconds. Okay, we have a first question here. What is her average acceleration? So, it means kailangan natin munang makuha yung acceleration using the given. So, kung titignan nyo, meron tayong 8 meters per second. Actually, this is a velocity or speed. So, V. And then, meron tayong time dito. 2.5 seconds. So, we have time. So, actually, just a side note, acceleration is also equal to change in speed or in velocity all over change in time. So, all you need to do is divide the speed by the time to get the acceleration. Kasi nga, di ba, yung acceleration natin is in meter per second squared. So, kung titignan nyo, yung velocity natin is in meters per second. Tapos, kapag dinivide natin siya ng time, which is in a second, dun yung makukuha yung unit na meter per second squared. So, for letter A, all you need to do is divide velocity over time to get acceleration. That will be 8 over 2.5. So, 8 meters per second over 2.5 seconds. So, your unit will be in meters per second squared. And then, just divide 8 divided by 2.5. You will get 3.2. So, this will be your acceleration. 3.2 meters per second squared. And then, next problem is what average force does the ground exert forward on the runner so that she achieves this acceleration? The player's mass is 70 kilograms and air resistance is negligible. So for the second problem, we are looking for the force exerted by the ground. So using the second law formula, force is equal to MA. So, mass daw is 70 kilograms. And then, multiplied by the acceleration na nakuha natin kanina, which is 3.2 meters per second squared. Okay? So, meron tayong mass. And then, if you will look at the units, meron tayong acceleration. So, kilogram meter per second squared is also equal to Newton. So, okay na yan. Newtons na yung magiging sagot natin. And then, all you have to do is multiply 70 by 3.2, which is 224. So, we have 224 newtons for the second problem or second requirement. Okay. And then the third law of motion is also known as the law of interaction. Okay. So the law of interaction, actually, the most important thing here is that, sabi niya, Newton's third law states that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So this law is what we most use as an explanation in aerodynamics. Okay, for example, we have an engine in aerodynamics. Okay, engine to. Okay. So, sa engine, papasok yung hangin. Diba? To create thrust. Tapos kapag nag-ignite yung fuel and air mixture, doon tayo nagkakaroon ng thrust. So, yung thrust na yun yung nagpro-propel sa aircraft forward. Okay? So, since napropel yung aircraft forward, meron tayong force na tumutulak papunta sa kanya, which is drag. So, yun yung isang example ng law of interaction pagdating sa aerodynamics. Also, an example here is that kapag yung engines natin, yung exhaust gas niya, lumabas yung exhaust gas, yung force ng mga exhaust gases na yun yung magtutulak sa aircraft forward. Kaya nagkakaroon tayo ng thrust. So, ganun yung law of interaction when it comes or applied to aerodynamics. Okay? So, a force is a push or pull upon an object. This implies there must be two objects, one being pushed and one doing the pushing. Thus, forces result from interactions between objects. According to Newton's third law, whenever objects interact with each other, they exert forces upon each other. These two forces the objects exert on each other are called action and reaction forces. Okay. So, sabi niya, friction is one type of reaction force. Okay, for example, if you rub your palms together, since yun yung action, okay? The action is rubbing your palms together. So, pag nagpapainit tayo, ganun ginagawa natin. When you rub your palms together, meron tayong reaction na nararamdaman. Okay, di ba umiinit yung palad natin? That is the reaction. Yung pag-init ng palad natin, because we are rubbing our palms together, we are creating friction. So, it means when you rub your palms together as an action, friction is the reaction. So, ganun siya. So, the statement means that in every reaction, there is a pair of objects or forces acting on the two interacting objects. The size of the forces on the first object equals the size of the force on the second object. The direction of the force on the first object is opposite to the direction of the force on the second object. Forces always come in pairs, equal and opposite action, reaction, force pairs. So, yun. Parang yung kanina lang na in-explain ko dun sa engine. Since meron tayong exhaust gases na lumalabas, okay, lumalabas yung exhaust gases, na papunta siya ng left side, ang nangyayari, or sa likod ng aircraft, kuwari, yung exhaust gases, di ba, papunta sila sa likod ng aircraft. So, ang nangyayari, since papunta sila sa likod, natutulak pa forward yung buong aircraft, which in turn produces the thrust. Kaya ganun nakakapag-produce ng thrust yung engine. That is because of the law of interaction. So, that ends our lesson for Newton's laws of motion. I'll see you on the next lesson. Bye! Subscribe. Click that notification button. Char!